Group Captain Mandrake speaking.
Listen to me carefully. The base is being put on condition red.
Jolly good idea. Keeps the men on their toes.
Group Captain, I'm afraid this is not an exercise.
Hell.
It appears that the order called for the planes to attack their targets inside Russia.
This man is obviously a psychotic.
The Doomsday Machine.
What is that?
A device which will destroy all life on Earth.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. Dr. Strangelove. How is it possible for them to have built such a thing?
It is not only possible, it is essential.
Dimitri, there's no point in you getting hysterical at a moment like this.
I wish we had one of them doomsday machines, Stacy.
Well, I was interested in whether or not I was going to get blown up by an H-bomb, you know.
I vaguely remember that, you know, if there was a nuclear attack, the best thing to do was hide under your desk or wear a tinfoil hat. He was terrified like everybody was.
He looked at our frailty, at our vanity, the fact that we have a tendency to self-destruct, we as humans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast here on the From the Cube Podcasting Network. My name is Jerome Cuson. As always, please like and subscribe our YouTube videos. Please give 4 and 5 star reviews on Spotify and Apple. Every week, we are discussing a movie or a television show. A lot of our focus has been on celebrating anniversaries. This week, we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of one of the greatest pieces of satire ever, that being Dr. Strangelove. My co-host, of course, is Brian. You can find our social media channels as well through Twitter and Instagram. Those links can be found in the description, whether you're on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Brian, this very simply is one of the greatest pieces of satire ever, I would say. I think this is a perfectly calibrated movie. This would be such a disaster if in the wrong director's hands, the wrong actors, the wrong performances, this could have been disaster. In fact, this was not a success at the box office, but from a reputation standpoint, this is generally regarded as one of the greatest movies in the history of this country, at least. Can't speak to the international and what people think internationally, but there are those themes, those ever-present nuclear fear themes that are permeating throughout this movie. And of course, you have the brilliant Peter Sellers kind of in the lead. You have a tremendous supporting performance out of George C. Scott, and you got the first of 2 straight James Earl Jones movies. And Stanley Kubrick with some very poignant feelings on the military, quite clearly. Brian, this movie, I'm just going to give my score right away here because this movie, in my mind, is 10 out of 10. This is a 5-star classic. This was on my list of 100 best movies, of my 100 favorite movies. And rewatching it again just reconfirmed all the feelings that I've ever had.
Yeah, it's up there for me. It's like a top 10 movie personally for me. This is my favorite Stanley Kubrick. It's like 9.5 out of 10. I don't want to give it a perfect 10 because I don't know what it is. There's something about it that's not quite there yet. I don't know what it is. All these years I've seen it. I feel like Godfather 1 and 2 are the 10 out of 10s for me, and like Dark Knight that have hit that level. It's very rare I'll give a 10 out of 10. But this is like on the level, very, very close. And look, as a little note here, like I've never seen Barry Lyndon. And I've never seen Full Metal Jacket. And I don't think I'll ever watch Full Metal Jacket because I have this thing with Vietnam movies that it just takes me to a different place mentally, and I don't want to go to that place because it's so sad and depressing. But I think the last Vietnam movie I saw was Rescue Dawn. And spoiler alert, the moment Steve Zahn's head got chopped off, I just stopped the movie and I just had to go away from the TV and just focus on something else because that was heartbreaking. But in this case, this is not, Full Metal Jacket. There's no crazy mental breakdowns in the field. This is just like a satire comedy, and I think this is why this is by far my favorite Stanley Kubrick that I've seen. People love 2001 to death. I wasn't really a big fan of that until much older, and that's more for the technical aspects of the film. In this case, this is all about like the script and the dialogue, and like it's kind of like the anti like 2001. It's very simple. And if you look at the title credits, I think the title credits are supposed to be satirical within themselves because, I mean, come on, Jerome, you can't tell me that doesn't look like a child wrote the fucking title credits of this movie with a crayon and they just layered it on the movie because it is so like unexpected. And I get for the time, like 1960s, a lot more filmmakers were experimenting with the title credit sequences. That's where I think James Bond started to kind of pick up on that in the 60s. But this is 62. So this feels like it's kind of like a middle finger to the industry in terms of what title sequences are supposed to look like. Because at this point, I think a good Hitchcock movie at this point in time has a great opening title sequence, credit sequence. In this case, it's just a bunch of like, you know, shots of the clouds and like giant crayon writing. So right off the bat, it's like it's giving you like a middle finger to like the establishment. It just feels like that. And then from there on, the dialogue is so like smart ass. Like, not a lot of people will get the dialogue in this movie throughout the years, but I think if you were one of those smart asses growing up like I was, and you kind of paid attention in like Euro history class and U.S. history class and kind of the cynicism about politics, this movie's for you. Because, like, it's just, the lines of this movie are so freaking good. Like, I guess we're going to spoiler right off the bat, but, gentlemen, there's no fighting in the war room. That's just so, like, what a line of dialogue. I mean, that's irony right there, right? It's perfect. It's what like comedy, the concept of
one of
comedy
the all-time best line deliveries as well. I mean, I just of all the people of all the performances to have not won an Academy Award, this has to be up there. I mean, this is just across the board. Peter Sellers is so fantastic in his three roles, and I think very often in 2024, when we talk about individuals playing multiple roles, I think we've sort of simplified it to either they're going to play twins. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, we're talking about Ewan McGregor in a season of Fargo. You're talking about Mark Ruffalo playing twins, things like that. Or you're in the Mike Myers territory where he's playing like 6 different characters in Austin Powers, but it's very clearly a comedy. Or you're talking about Eddie Murphy in the Nutty Professor movies. But here you have Peter Sellers playing it straight, playing 3 very different characters, I would say. Lionel Mandrake, Merkin Muffley, and the titular Dr. Strangelove. I mean, you could not find 3 more different characters. And, I mean, his line deliveries as Mandrake especially, he just nails that Midwestern accent, which it's unbelievable to think that he has 3 very different accents, and the one that sounds the most cartoonish is the German one. But I mean, he is just unbelievable in this movie, and I will certainly cede the floor to you so that you can talk about George C. Scott. But just in terms of one of the great all-time performances, Peter Sellers is it. I think my favorites, I mean, there's so many scenes and lines and great stuff, but the initial scene where Muffley and Turgidson are going back and forth, and the look on Sellers' face when he is so annoyed. You could tell he hates him. Just flat out cannot stand Turgidson. And he just gets more and more annoyed with each answer. It's really, really good stuff.
It's hilarious, and I can't help but thinking, like, in the modern times, like, he looks like Stanley Tucci. If Stanley Tucci just put on a little bit more weight, because he's really, really thin, but man, he looks like Stanley Tucci in modern 2024. So that was pretty, like, I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. But then him as the president is so funny, because when he's talking to the Russian president, of course this is a friendly call. Wouldn't I call you if it wasn't friendly? Like, like just the simplicity of it all, and just like the simplicity of the dialogue and how just sarcastic it is deep down and layered it is. Man, that war room's, I love the war room set. It's incredible looking, even in black and white. Like, it looks spectacular for the wide shots and the way that you don't even notice there's Dr. Strangelove sitting at the table for like 30 minutes, and he's there apparently, and you just don't notice. And all of a sudden, like 30 minutes later, he just raises his hand and starts talking. So it's just one of those things that I was just like, wow, like the detail and like the thought process behind the lighting in that room too, because there's like a little light coming in from like the brick walls or whatever. So it's got this crazy look at the end of the movie where it's like lights coming in, but everything's dark in this room. It's very, very crazy looking stuff, but it's black and white and it looks beautiful. And the cinematography in this is pretty damn good, considering, like I said, it's an anti-2001 type film. But man, I think this movie like really gets the black and white, down, especially with the war room scene. And of course, before I talk about George C. Scott, I got to talk about Sterling Hayden, because he's the general that sets off this whole thing with like setting the bombers to bomb the nuke Russia or whatever. And he's just having this mental breakdown, and no one seems to notice that he's having this mental breakdown, which is like incredible to me, because like I think this happens today where just like people are in charge and they're having mental breakdowns and making these crazy ass decisions, and people are just like, okay.
Brian, what would lead you to believe that any of our leaders would do something like this, where they would have a mental breakdown? I'm not seeing the connection.
Oh, I don't want to name names, Jerome, but goddamn, dude, it's like this is so relevant today, because the thing is like he's not having such a major mental breakdown that's so noticeable. It's subtle, but once you start talking to the guy, it's clear that he's not in the right state of mind. But if you don't have that kind of dialogue with this character, you're not going to find that out. So you're just going to end up following his orders. So that's the crazy, scary part of all this, is just like these people that are in charge. And then it's like, how did the president allow this? It's like, don't you remember, sir? You okayed Plan R like months ago. And then just the fact that the president forgets all these things that he approves of, and then he's talking to the Russian ambassador, and he's like, we know this because we saw it in the New York Times. How did you forget? You're the president. So it's just these little things. It's like, goddamn, it's like it's so true.
This movie gets the little things right, and it gets the big things right. And that's, I think very often we have movies that get one of the two right most of the way. But I mean, this movie is very subtle until it's not. And I think it certainly has its moments of just going all the way, and I think in those moments, I think it's really effective. But what makes Sterling Hayden so memorable is just he has one of those very distinctive faces. Like, he is the very definition of a corrupt cop, which he plays in the first Godfather, which he also, of course, is in this movie as kind of a corrupt general. But I think it's worth noting, all of the American generals in this movie are portrayed to be absolute lunatics. And maybe that's something that was not, like, I can imagine somebody going in 1964 and not appreciating that. But Stanley Kubrick very much ahead of his time, because, I mean, if you look at the kinds of movies that are coming out 6-7 years later, think about a movie like MASH coming out in 1970. Like, it became very relevant to make fun of and poke fun at the United States military because of what's going on in Vietnam. We referenced this a few weeks ago when we talked about Sergeant Slaughter, and just the idea of like this Gomer Pyle like parody figure, and that's why Slaughter was kind of a heel, because of people coming back from Vietnam and hating their drill sergeants. And in 1964, I'm not sure that we necessarily had that level of appreciation, but very shortly thereafter we would. Of course, this movie becomes all the more relevant because of the issues surrounding nuclear bombs, which remains a concern to this day, certainly. But I definitely think that in more broad strokes, the corruption of the military, the haplessness of politicians, those are the things that I think are still all the more relevant here in 2024. And I think that is what kind of brings this all together. And again, I think Peter Sellers, I mean, he really is the glue of this movie. And, certainly Stanley Kubrick, of course, deserves a ton of credit, for being the great director that he is. But I don't think you really don't get a movie unless Peter Sellers nails all three roles. And he has to nail all three roles in very specific ways. When he's playing the president of the United States, he's playing this boring Midwestern guy. And that's that's something very specific. In another plot line, he's playing kind of a British general who is like earnest but kind of hapless at the same time, and he is just dealing with these crazy Americans. And I think an underrated scene is when the general does not want to shoot the Coke machine because it's private property. I think that is, just the idea of we value property over people. Does that really says it all? That is really a very profound statement on the nature of capitalism, and I think that scene really exemplifies that. But the insanities of the generals, we've talked a little bit about Sterling Hayden, but Brian, I'm going to clear the floor so that you can talk about George C. Scott.
This is one of my all-time favorite performances, man. And I'm not even that big of a George C. Scott guy. And if you look his career up, he's mainly known as Patton and the more serious stuff. And if you're a horror movie fan, was it The Uninvited or something like that? Something where he's like dealing with ghosts and stuff, and it's a super serious, dark movie, and he's super serious in that. But in this, he's like the opposite of that, and it's like he's showing his range. But according to what I'm reading, it's like it's an accident, because what Stanley Kubrick did is he tricked them. So basically, when you're on set as an actor, you want to have different takes, different takes of the dialogue, not just one take of a certain tone, but you did different tones, right? So as a practice, Stanley Kubrick said, let's just have it loosen it up, kind of like free range kind of takes, and we're not going to use those, but we're going to use the serious ones. But for practice, we'll use go hog wild. So that's why we see this most expressive face. This expressive face that he has during the war room scenes, and the fact that he's chewing so much gum. It's like he was completely unhinged, and he didn't realize it, that they were going to use that footage, and he got so pissed off at Stanley Kubrick for not using the serious footage, but it doesn't work. So I don't know. I feel bad for George C. Scott, because he's putting on one of the best performances of his career, but he doesn't realize it. And he thinks that what he's doing on screen is not going to be seen, and it turns out they use those cuts. So it's like, okay, man, maybe he's just really talented at being really funny, and he never knew it. I don't know, because he's so funny in this, and I can't believe how funny he is when he's not even talking. It's like when the president's on the phone with the Russian president. There's this whole thing of him just having the camera on him reacting, and he's not saying a fucking word, and he's holding his head, and he's chewing gum, and he's nervous, and he's acting with his eyes. It's incredible. It's like his reactions are so great. I actually took a snapshot. I said that to Jerome. It's like the perfect moment where he's got his hands over his fucking face and head, and he's just got this look with his eyes, and he hasn't said anything in 5 minutes, but you can tell he just wants to say so much. But then at the same time, he's almost at the level of Sterling Hayden's character in terms of being mentally unstable. He doesn't quite go there, but he does lay the line. He does say at this point, sir, with the bomber already out there, maybe we should just take advantage of it, and just start bombing Russia, and then catch you by surprise. And then the mine shaft gap at the end, that line just gets me every time, because it's so you'll miss it if you don't pay attention at the end. And what they're talking about is this fictional gap in terms of this idea that if the world's surface is going to be destroyed nuclearly, they're going to have to go underground. And if they go underground, shouldn't they have nukes when they get out after 100 years? So this becomes this stupid, we don't, Mr. President, we're going to have a mine shaft gap. And it just gets me every time, because it's so stupid and it means nothing. But he's so serious about it because he hates the Russians so bad. It's just so fucking funny. Yeah, this performance is incredible. It's up there top 5 with me. I guess some of my all-time favorite characters are Michael Corleone in The Godfather, Quentin Jaws, and this is up there too. It's just something about this guy and this performance that I'm not even a big fan of his career. I'm a big fan of this character. So Buck Turgidson, and if you kind of read between the lines, and if you say Turgidson really fast, it sounds like turd, and that's the whole joke of it, because he's supposed to be a turd bag in real life, and it's just great. And some of the names, I gotta say, in this movie are so subtle, it's unbelievable. Colonel Baguano, Guano is shit, so his name is Bad Shit. But Guano is not a real last name, but they gave it to him as a real last name. So just weird stuff like that. And I know Stanley Kubrick must have been just laughing inside when no one else on set was probably laughing, and it was probably just funny to him. and a bunch of smartasses that watched the movie. But man, this felt like he was having so much fun writing it for his kind of intelligence, because he's a super smart dude, one of the smartest people to ever make movies, very detail oriented. And so for a detail oriented guy to write a script like this, you can tell like he put even just like so much thought into like a small character like Baguano, and just put a funny name on him. And if you look at the names too, like Lothar Zog, that's James Earl Jones. Like, what kind of name is Lothar Zog? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not even an American name. And he's an African American. So it's like, and it's his first movie, by the way, which is really cool. And the way we timed this out, next week is The Sandlot. So that's great timing as well. And we just talked about him in Field of Dreams. And this is his first movie. And he does a good job. It's not like he's like stealing the show or anything, but just the names. And then Major T.
Look, Brian, all I'm going to say is after I put over Bob Newhart last week, I'm a little concerned.
Don't say that, man, because William Shatner's 94 too. So, God damn it. Let's not jinx these things, people. But yeah, our heroes are old. That's all I'm gonna say. But I love Major T.J. King Kong, played by Slim Pickens. The iconic image of the dude just riding the nuclear bomb like a horse. The angle to which they shot it at looks spectacular because it feels like you're actually moving with the camera, and it feels like you're actually going down at like 50, 100 miles an hour, whatever it was, to the surface. And then him yelling at the end. So it's one of those iconic imagery kind of in movies, you know, like it's so iconic because they've used it in so many other things and made fun of it. But his character, I don't know, man, something about it is so like innocent, and that's kind of like it feels like that's the representation of the common American, naive and innocent, just following orders, right? And what does it lead to? Is death and causing a doomsday device to be set off at the same time.
The big thing is that, you know, Peter Sellers not being involved in the plane stuff, I think it makes it feel all the more sincere. Again, the movie is played mostly straight. There's a lot of subtlety. Again, the last 20 minutes it becomes very unsubtle with Dr. Strangelove's reveal, the nuclear bomb. We'll be seeing you again, like that song playing at the end, like it becomes very unsubtle. But especially the stuff on the plane, I mean, they are filmed as if they are the protagonists. They are not filmed and portrayed as antagonists for what they're doing.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing is that Peter Sellers was cast as King Kong, but he couldn't get the accent right. And once they started filming, he got hurt, so they kind of gave him the out of like, maybe I don't need to be in this section, just 3 roles is enough. And he's already playing a German, he's already playing a British guy and an American, so it's like he already had the range, so it kind of felt like, okay, maybe give someone else the slot. And I think Slim Pickens did a better job than Peter Sellers would have in this particular role. It just feels like he's more authentic because that's his actual accent, and that's kind of like he feels that authentic American kind of boy, and I think that adds to the ending when he's riding it like a cowboy. So I think that's very significant, and I think Slim Pickens being casted is actually like a blessing in disguise than what the studio wanted.
Especially because Southern accents especially can become very cartoonish, whereas I think you can't really like, to me, a Midwestern accent, like, yes, you could do a parody of a Chicago accent, but I think the general like Ohio, Indiana, Midwestern accent, I don't think that you necessarily get that as nasally. So I think that helps a lot. And again, if Peter Sellers is doing a Southern accent, maybe it does become something akin to a cartoon. But I just don't know that it necessarily works. And again, I really like the fact that you do get some other really good performances. And I also like the idea that Peter Sellers, like, yes, he is the president. He is a British general, but I like the fact that he is not one of the American generals. The American generals are played by Americans. I think that's actually a positive.
Yeah, for sure. And the other line that really gets me, it's on the plane, and they're going over the kit that they opened up just in case they crash land, and they have all these things like morphine pills, silk stockings, chocolate, $100 bills. And then the line that Slim Pickens delivers is like, man, you could have a hell of a weekend in Vegas with this stuff. And that was in 1962, and that's still obviously relevant today because Vegas is still known for its craziness. And trust me, I go there 3 times a year, so I know. But the thing about this line is that it was actually re-recorded. They re-recorded the audio. And do you know what city they actually said for the first initial run before something happened in 1963?
I don't.
They said the city Dallas. And what had happened in Dallas in 1963?
Yeah, the assassination of JFK.
So there you go. That's a little bit of history there. Because I mean, if you would have said if the original line was Dallas, it would not be as funny today. I don't think. So I'm glad they changed it to Vegas because that's still awesome and relevant. But man, what a kind of dark thing they put when they put Dallas and they had to change it because of the death of the president, which obviously affected this movie as well. Because what I mean, it's not that big of a box office success. I would say it's cult classic. Obviously, I don't think it's.
I mean, I think it's.
I don't know. People love Clockwork Orange. You know what I'm saying? Like they love 2001.
It's a masterpiece. I mean, I think this is a straight up masterpiece. I think this is Kubrick's best movie. You know, I know that Clockwork Orange, I think, is a little bit more polarizing than you're giving it credit for. While it certainly does have its fans, I mean, I actually hate that movie, but I think this and The Shining, I mean, those to me are the Stanley Kubrick movies that probably I idealize more than any others. Let's mention the original ending. So, of course, the ending is the world blows up, which is pretty much the only ending that you can have for a movie like this. But the original ending was supposed to be a pie fight. Now, Brian, I am somebody who believes that we need to bring pie fights back into the world of cinema. The pie fights are good and funny, and we've had a real lack of them lately. And look, I even when they do, like, do you remember Mad TV when they did a cocaine fight instead of a pie fight? Do you remember this?
I vaguely remember that. Yes.
Brian, but I do have to say, in this specific case, I'm not sure a pie fight would necessarily have been appropriate. I think it brings it too much into farce territory. I think ending it with the world ending, that to me is like, again, and I love the fact that we have now talked about two movies where the world has ended. Very appropriate for 2024.
Oh boy, hopefully that's not a premonition, but yeah, I think the dialogue at the end is much better because it just shows you that even when they get out of the mines in 100 years, they're still going to be arguing and bitching with each other and hating each other. Hence the mine shaft gap. The pie thing is like,
I love that George Scott talks about the mine shaft gap as if it's a real thing. It is just a hypothetical.
I think that's what gets me every time is that it's not even a thing, and he's just like making it a thing in his head. But yeah, a pie fight is such an old school thing, and I think the reason it's not necessarily like an audience preference, I think it's just like because like pie on a set for 6 hours, you're asking for trouble. You know what I'm saying? And whenever they do a pie fight, it's never ever like a real pie. They have to put like pie crust and then fill it with whipped cream, and that's how you get that effect of the splashing and the whipped cream faces and all that kind of thing. But if you do that on set, it's gonna smell bad after a while. So I get it. It's a cleanup thing, I think, because that shit smells after a while. If you're filming it like in a hot set, man, I can only imagine. Because I've heard stories about like horror movies using like, you know, stuff like that for special effects, and then having to wait till the set actually, when you actually film it on set, that stuff like will just sit there sometimes and not even be touched, and it just gets, yeah, I can understand why, but I know why you want it back because it's old school and it's slapstick, Three Stooges, whatever you want to call it, but I think it would have been a little too much. I think the dialogue at the end like kept it up perfectly because it just shows you that we didn't learn shit from this Doomsday device or anything from this movie. It's like we didn't learn shit at all. We're just gonna go back to the same place we were in 100 years when we get out. So, yeah, that's why I think because when I read that about that ending, I just can't think like I don't know if that works. And I see in the pictures. There's an actual picture on Wikipedia, but I'm sure someone has maybe the original footage, but it just doesn't feel right. But yeah, I think that's one of the more positive changes, and of course that and the Dallas line. But overall, I think this is like 9.5 out of 10 for me. And like I mentioned before, the only reason I haven't watched Barry Lyndon is because it just seems so long, and I'm not really into the story. And then of course I told you my Vietnam shtick. It's just hard for me to watch Vietnam movies, so I don't think I'll ever watch Full Metal Jacket. But yeah, I think Peter Sellers in this is just incredible, and he got nominated for Best Actor. But
and he lost to Rex Harrison for My Fair Lady, which, I mean, it's fine, but I don't know, man. That feels like a big mistake.
Well, here's the thing. Who knew that role in My Fair Lady with Rex Harrison would go on to influence Stewie, the character from Family Guy, directly?
I'm sure nobody could because Family Guy wasn't invented until 35 years later.
I know. It's just whenever because I know we're getting off topic, but when I watched My Fair Lady for the first time in high school, we read the play as well. We were doing the comparisons
right.
between the play and the movie, and as soon as I see this, I raise my hand and ask my teacher, like, is this what they based Stewie off of? And he's like, obviously. So that's a little lesson for you. Rex Harrison is kind of like the pseudo origin story of Stewie Griffin. But yeah, I mean, Peter Sellers getting Best Actor nomination and not even having like the thing where it says as the role of, it's just going to list all 3 roles, which is pretty crazy. And I think that's the only time it's ever happened where an actor's been nominated having multiple roles and getting the lead actor nod. So that's pretty cool. Just kind of crazy that Stanley Kubrick didn't win Best Director or Best Picture. But again, it's one of those things where I think it just kind of ages well, like a fine wine, this movie. And it's not going to be appreciated when it comes out initially. But man, it's just, I feel like it ages so well. And it's just one of those movies for smartasses like me. It's not for everybody, that's for sure. But I feel like this movie really just clicks with me because I was one of those kids that really paid attention in U.S. history class and Euro history class. So all the Russian jokes and the stuff about when Turgidson talks about, hey, don't get me wrong, you guys didn't give up on the Nazis. The Nazis tried to like kill all you guys, and you just kept fighting back. I respect that, but when it comes to Americans and science, blah blah blah, okay. That whole dialogue there was great. So 9.5 out of 10 for me. I can't recommend this enough. So I watched the version on Amazon, which is the Blu-ray cut, but I know there's a 4K cut, and I've been waiting for a version of this movie where they get out all the dust and all the scratches and stuff like that. But I don't know if we're ever going to get that clarity. But man, I'm hoping for a 4K cut that does that.
Absolutely, and you've also, in those waning moments, I mean, there's such a fascinating sexual component to all of this too. I mean, you literally have Dr. Strangelove doing the little Heil Hitler every time he seemingly is getting off on the idea of all these people dying. Again, the movie is subtle until it's not, and it's so incredibly well calibrated, and that's the thing that I will always think about with this movie, because again, it would be so easy for this to be just a disaster. Like, this movie could absolutely not work. Like you mentioned, like, what if Robin Williams was in this? Like, I think Robin Williams would be good. Like, I just don't think that he could get this kind of role. Again, playing the 3 roles, I just don't think that Robin Williams would do this as well as Peter Sellers did. I mean, Peter Sellers literally is the perfect person for this role, and I don't know how many people could do what he did in this movie. It's one of the best performances that I've ever seen in a movie or television show, and well supported with Sterling Hayden, Slim Pickens, as well as George C. Scott. So that is it for our discussion of Dr. Strangelove. Again, an all-timer, one of the best American movies of all time. We are going to continue our look at some significant anniversaries in 2 weeks, but next week we are doing something very special again. We are continuing the 9-inning series, and Brian, I'll let you talk about that.
Well, our timing is weird because in the order of things that I put the movie order in, the 5th inning is going to be The Sandlot. Came out in April of 93. And it just so happens to have James Earl Jones in it as well. So I guess from Field of Dreams to Lion King to Doctor Strangelove and now to The Sandlot, we are just, giving as much love as we can to James Earl Jones. Well, we still can, I guess. And that's the only thing I can positively say about that, because I don't want to jinx things, because older actors nowadays, yeah. But I don't want to jinx it, because I want him to be, as here on Earth as long as possible. So I'm not going to jinx that. But James Earl Jones has really had an influence on us this year. But yeah, the 5th inning. The Sandlot for me is a classic. It takes place in the San Fernando Valley in 1962, even though it's filmed in Utah. But man, I watched this in theaters, and it's really taken a hold of me. And I never realized how much it really influenced, like, I guess my generation and the next generation in terms of, like, summer, friendship, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a fun discussion and a good nostalgic look back at baseball in 1993. So there you go.
All right. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.